Hey mamas, I'm Lacey, your lactation counselor, and you're listening to the Early Motherhood Guide podcast, where motherhood is simply supported. Today, I have the opportunity to talk with Leela Saperstein. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
I am I'm Dr. Lilach Saperstein. Lilach is fine too. And I'm an audiologist and also parent coach. Mostly what I do is I work with families who have a deaf or hard of hearing child in the family and how that experience really affects everything in the relationship, in the early days, um, and throughout their development, communication, connection, those kind of things.
Yeah. So, why did you shift your focus from being an audiologist to more of a parent-child connection focused?
Yeah. So I always was really fascinated with early childhood development. Both of my parents, a lot of people in my life are teachers, and there was a lot of emphasis on this relationship between the parents and the children and how that is the foundation for your whole life and going forward. So it was sort of like that came first. Then while I was doing my studies, I was really interested in science and health professions. So I found audiology, which really did combine those two things. It was very medical, but it was also actually about how we communicate in our relationships. So it combined a lot of my interests. And then I worked clinically for, in different settings, in hospitals and clinics. And also I worked at a school and I saw all the different angles of how, yes, I had all this training in audiology and testing and hearing aids and cochlear implants, very technical things, but how they actually played out in people's lives, how children were able to ask for things and connect with their peers and connect with their caregivers. And I was seeing a lot of the gaps that were happening there with the professionals in the lives, like being talking way over what parents actually needed. A lot of jargon, a lot of here's what you should do, milestones, um, and not as much support for the parents' experience, their heart and their pain and their curiosity about their kids.
Yeah, I can imagine being able to communicate, and a lot is lost when a parent has no experience in this and wasn't expecting, I'm sure. Um, what kind of communication skills are developed from birth, and what is that? How do parents communicate with their child as a newborn, and how is that newborn communicating with their parents?
That's an amazing question. I love it because there's so many layers of the answer. Most of us think that it's, talking and listening, and that's how we as humans make ourselves known and share the thoughts in our mind to get to the minds of someone else through making words and then having those words be perceived as acoustic symbols. Like, hearing and talking is sort of the default, but actually we're communicating all the time with our facial expressions, with our body language, with our body temperature, with our proximity, how close or far we are from people. We're doing so many things. And new mamas know this very well, how much you're actually having a dialogue with your baby. There's hormonal changes and pheromone changes, how you smell, and all these different things. So communication is a much broader word than talking and listening. And I think that's one of the most crucial things that people should take away from this, because a lot of times people say, "Oh, I'm not talking to my baby. They don't understand." Well, you should talk to them and then they will understand. That's how that whole process goes. But then of course there is sign language and gestures and even eye contact, which is one of the most powerful connectors. So what I always recommend to any parents and anyone is to really focus on getting in touch with yourself for that brief moment, that pause, and being super right where you are in the here and now for even a brief moment. And then in that space that you've created inside yourself, then you can also bring someone else into that. So many times we're frazzled, we've got our music and our thoughts and are frazzled, and someone's here and, dishes and like all the real life things that we're managing and doing. Like it's stressful to our system. So I really love the tip that people have shared, which is like that, first minute of the day first greeting that you should like prepare yourself for that, and then go into your child's room or like pick them up from their bassinet or whatever, and really have like, well, 60 seconds of I am here with the touch, the warm and, holding, communicating that I'm here, your breath is slower, your heartbeat is slower. And then the last minute of the day, right? Like for bedtime routine, which we sometimes make so complicated, but like don't miss that one moment, that hug, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and even just the, minute to yourself, that is something I never do, and I think that is so smart, um, just taking that moment of pause and just being like, "Okay," getting ready for being connected with yourself. I've never really thought about that, so can you please elaborate a bit more on, like, how to connect with yourself, and why do you find that so important?
Yeah. I feel that most of us do not have a lot of experience with being really still and quiet without so many external stimuli and input. There's always things coming in visually, auditorily, even tactile. Like we just have so much stuff in our environment. And how often do we actually just not do that? Like not have all these things coming in, or even have an environment in which to do that, or the resources to have that. But even so, even within our very wild and bright and loud world and experience, there are places and ways that we can connect to that stillness. For some people, they really are very close to water. So, like, taking a shower, yeah, but that's ambitious, right? Even having the water running for 10 seconds, like while you wash your hands, that can be sort of an anchor, a cue. This water is running. Where did it come from? Just have like a little thought for some stream or ocean or lake or the rain. Like all these, water, I think, is one of those things that flows, it moves, it
Yeah.
connects us a lot. And then the second super easy one is to actually look at the sky, look out the window, take, again, 5 seconds to notice what color is the sky today? Is it overcast? Is there a cloud? And in that question, in that moment of noticing, you've already won, you know.
Yeah.
This is something that's super close to my heart, is that people like talk about meditation retreats for 10 days. Like that's not motherhood compatible usually. And it's also maybe not exactly what you need for your life. That's one version of that works for some people. But in our day, how do we find those moments, like minuscule, small steps? That's something that's a big project for me also this year,
Yeah.
is that we have this program called All About You 52, where I send out these audios once a week. And that's sort of the skill for the week. Like the first week we had just now in the beginning of January was putting your hand on your heart, on your chest, and just feel like the contact of your hand to your chest. What does that bring up for you? Like sometimes it makes you want to cry. Sometimes you're like, it's cold. Just like connect you to yourself and whatever that means for you.
Nice. And why do you find that so important?
Because then we also start to develop this compassion for our own experience and our own needs. Then we can do that for others, and a feedback cycle, right? Also,
Mm.
when we do that for others, we can find it for ourselves. So it's always, coming around, going around. And I think we have so many expectations of what motherhood is and how we have to be this idealized, perfect, loving storybook mom that's just always speaking at this register. Children, the food is ready. Like, that's not real life. But within the chaos and within the difficulty and the drama and the siblings fighting and the baby crying and the homework, oh my God, don't get me started on homework. And whatever the place is for you, that like it feels like this huge overwhelm
Mhm.
in your parenting journey, you can also find the places where, hey, I actually listened that one time, or I actually was attuned to how their face was when we did such and such activity, you know?
That always feels like such a win.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, tell me more about what connection-based parenting is.
Connection-based parenting is, I think, going back to knowing that you don't need to be perfect. Like letting go of rules and the shoulds, the things that
Mhm.
you're supposed to be doing, and actually being more and more in right now and in who you're with, in the room that you're in, the person that you're with, and the child that's in front of you, not the child that's in your head, the one that you constructed, the stories and the expectations, and certainly not the child that's in other people's heads, like, what your mother-in-law would like you to do, or what your
Yeah.
spouse might be thinking, like, or partner, other people's perception of how your child should be. And so many times, I feel like I'll just share my own personal experience with this. I have 3 daughters that are
Okay.
8, 6, and almost 5. And sometimes when we're in the park, they're loud, they're yelling, they're joyous,
Mhm.
they're running around. And I hear myself say, oh, it's going to bother the neighbors. It's inappropriate. It's not modest. Like, there's so many different layers of the various traumas and difficulties of the past
Mhm.
where it's like, no, 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 no. I come back to right now and I say, I'm not in anybody else's story. And I'm seeing they're safe, they're happy, they're allowed to yell. This is an okay outdoor voice situation. And then I can see the joy, and I can see their experience there, and their yelling is good, is right, outside of my stories. So I think
Yeah.
if we can focus on connection in our parenting rather than like goals, milestones, even though those are important and we need those also. And we need our professionals helping us out and guiding us. Like, I'm on both sides of this, but within that, let's do more connecting. Another example is, as an audiologist, a lot of times when we fit a hearing aid, there's a lot of emotions in the room of what this expectation is going to be like. We're going to hear for the first time, hear mom's voice. I'm certain people have seen those videos. They go viral every time
Oh,
because they are so emotional. But the ones that don't go viral are the ones where the baby cries, or the baby pulls it out, or the child like has a tantrum. And that happens too. That might also be the experience. Like, it's not always this beautiful fairy moment, especially not when you don't put music over it.
yeah,
It's very easy to curate those, but yeah.
that's gotta be so overwhelming for the child to hear all of
Yeah,
that all at once. Um,
exactly.
yeah, I love
So I
that
always tell the
point.
parents, like, I always like would preface that experience with, whatever they do is going to be okay. We're going to be with them. If they're very clingy, if they need a hug, if we need to stop, they need to go out, come back in, like, try to keep it as present as we can.
Yeah, that is a great point. And I also love that you brought up the expectations that you think other people might have of your kids, we all go through that, right? I always
Mhm.
bring up the expectations that we have of ourselves, but I've never thought about, yeah, we all have expectations of our kids and what other people we think, or even looking by seeing their eyes, right? On what these other people expectations are on how our children should be. And that does essentially take away your connection with that child, because they are not meeting yours or this stranger's expectations in some setting. So, yeah, stripping away those expectations, and just being able to be with your kid, however they might be in that situation, would make a lot more memories, like positive memories for sure.
Yeah.
So, what do you think is the most effective way to connect with your child?
Okay. So I do think this would depend on the child. Different children have different temperaments, and it depends on you, what you feel is good for you. But I really love the idea of getting down on their level. So even with babies that are doing tummy time, lie down also on your tummy. That would be a good sort of break for you, also grounding. But anytime you're actually on the same plane, getting down to the floor, playing with kids, or bringing them up, sitting on the couch, like, you know, I'm also, if you haven't noticed, trying to do things in an easier way, and,
Mhm.
taking off the stress. And so, like, reading a book has huge communication benefits, right? Like, so many different skills, shared attention, and all these things that we are constantly telling you to read books. But besides for the actual book and language development, there's also this. very connected and intimate moment when a child is on your lap and you're looking at something together. Um, I think that this goes back to the pressure around like touch and a lot of parents being touched out, just like so much stimulation from constantly being tugged at and pulled and, needing your attention, needing your attention. But if you can do the thing where you offer the attention in a like time container, a
Yeah.
contained section, then I think that that's one place where you could say, I'm not just reading the books because they said I have to. And it's like, for the cognitive and language development, it's also for the sitting together. Um, and I think another really fun thing that's an easy way to connect is over any kind of activity that you can do that doesn't have a point, right? There's not a goal. Like
Yeah.
take a paper and scribble on it, and the scribbling is the thing. It's very cliche. The journey is the
Mhm.
point, not that that's the thing. Kids make art. They're always making art. They're always putting stuff together and organizing rocks. They're doing it all the time, not because they want to sell it on Etsy or because they're going to take a picture of it. Like they're not so much goal oriented, and we got to go back to that with them.
Yeah, I think that's so true, especially with a lot of us with our firstborns, right? We have to have them achieve, 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 and everything has to be, educational, right? And so, yeah, just taking back that and just releasing, like, hey, we
Yeah.
don't need everything to be about being the next Vincent Van Gogh or, something like that, right? So, yeah, I love that.
Oh,
Just go ahead.
but even more so, play-based learning and
Mhm.
safety and connection and attachment are the biggest gifts that we could give our kids that will affect them positively and let them be big achievers in big ways. So if that helps you with your, reverse psychology, like letting them make a mess is actually good for them,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Not creating perfection and not like allowing room for mistakes and the social emotional self-regulation, all of those skills, those
Yeah.
will go very far.
Yeah, for sure. How often do you find it's best to take those moments and connect with your child?
It's so personal, so much about what you have going in your life, what your network is, your system. If you have other people who can give you the half hour throughout a day, like, wow, that's such an ambitious number. I was like, I was going to say 10 minutes, then it's a half hour. Whoa. Where you have your own time, or you have like one on one time with one child, and when there are
Mhm.
multiple children, like there's so many things that go into it. But I do believe that everyone can find, hopefully, 1 minute, like even that is huge. And
Yeah.
then if you want to say 3 minutes a week, how about that? Like whatever goal feels right. And again, it's not like we have to take the kids out for a 6 hour outing and like everything, like even just looking in their eyes, good morning, wow, it's so good to see you, how did you sleep, whether that's verbal or just emotional,
Mhm.
felt like that that does so much for our brains. We're all wired for connection, and feedback for everybody positive.
Yeah. I know a parenting coach was saying every time that you were separated at some point. So like after nap or after sleeping or after school, like those are always
Mhm.
important times. And I never thought about that until she said this because in the morning, like I just want a minute, right? And so yeah, but reconnecting at that time when they are just waking up is so important. And so even if it
Mhm.
is just 1 minute with them to reconnect and say, hi, I missed you, and looking them in their eyes, I'm sure makes a huge difference.
I actually started doing that with my partner, my husband. Um, like sometimes there was a period of time where I noticed everyone's so busy running around,
Mm.
chores, da da da, work, all the things. And he came into a room, he was talking to me, I was still on my phone. That was not the first time that had happened. And he said to me at one point, like, "Can you look at me for a second?" And I was like, "Whoa, good point. Oops." Like, I'm so focused on, connection-based parenting, all this. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Also, this, it applies to all of our relationships and all the
Yeah.
ways that we." So, I sort of did like this internal check. Like, when he walks in the room, I will look up, even if it's just that one. I'll keep scrolling because I'm doing things, I'm making appointments.
Yeah.
As if everything I'm doing on my phone is so important.
Right.
But, sometimes you're in the middle of answering a message and you're like really in it, but still I really sort of this new habit I'm trying to form that like when he walks in the room or I walk in the room, I try to do that one moment of actually look at his face.
Yeah.
Hi.
Oh, it's so important. Our poor husbands, they just get
Yeah.
lost. We're so focused on parenting. Yeah, even with kids too. But anytime anyone comes up to me, whether it's my husband or my kids, I have 3 as well, and, just pausing and setting the phone down for the second and looking in their eyes and being like, "Oh, yes, like, I see you," because that's exactly what I would want in return, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing like no phone for 3 hours while I'm only with the kid. Like I can't. No, it is an integrated part of our life.
Yeah,
So it's always like a balance
yeah,
between the things that we want to do.
yeah. I think that's a small gesture that goes a long way, though.
Yeah,
So, hearing and having the access to sound, right, are not the only ways for your child to develop language. But what are some other ways that they learn?
sure. So we definitely have an incredible ability to be able to also see and communicate through gestures and through fully developed sign languages. Like there are sign languages all over the world that developed on their own American Sign Language, British Sign Language, et cetera, lots and lots. Just as you have many different spoken languages. It's just a misconception that people think all the sign languages are gestural, but they're actually very developed languages with their own syntax and sentence structure, word order. um, and it's incredible that children that don't have access to sound, who are deaf, when they're given access to visual language from a signing person in their life, they actually develop language markers earlier. They babble sooner, by moving their hands in different, not quite right signs, but they're getting there. And that babbling happens much sooner actually than
Oh,
spoken babbling.
yeah.
um, and really the environment, when there's a language rich environment, whether that's spoken or signed, really helps children to develop. And it's incredible to see also when there are children who don't have that access, and then they're 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, whatever, at whatever age
Yeah.
they might get into an environment where they do have that access, to see how thirsty they are. Really, that's the word for it. Like so ready and engaged with that input of being able to communicate your, not just naming things, not just what is the name of things around me, but requests and jokes and things you don't want, which is a very important self-advocacy ability, that we know that children with disabilities are actually at greater risk for all sorts of abuses and things, that you know they are a vulnerable population. And one of
Mhm.
the protective factors for everybody is being able to communicate and be able to advocate, explain what's happening to you, or talk about something that's not exactly in the present, but what happened, talking about your expectations about what will happen. These are very high function, high level um, language tasks. So I think it's super important for people to think about language as a much bigger project than just sort of learning how to say your words and not having a lisp, or saying
Yeah.
wabbit instead of rabbit. Like that's a very small slice of what speech pathologists help with, what audiologists can be involved in.
Yeah. Wow. I never even
Mhm,
thought about that, but that is so true. Um, with you were saying all these different ages, like I can't imagine
mhm.
someone just at the age of 7 or 10 having the ability to learn sign. Um, what is an average age when they start learning these things or having
It
access?
really depends on the environment. Like
Yeah.
there are so many children that have incredible parents and people, again, with resources and community, that they're able to learn sign language, because most deaf children are actually born to hearing parents.
Hmm.
And that is, it usually does come as a surprise and a shock, and there's a big learning curve to decide what to do, to go down the route of the technology and learning how to listen and speak, introducing signs, some mixture of both. um, one other thing I have to mention about language. is that language is the basis for our cognition, for putting things together, for thinking, for having complex thoughts. So, when children don't have access to that and go through their life really isolated, it also affects their actual cognitive development. And there is a big risk of something called language deprivation. Just as someone who's left in a dark room with no touch, like we know that can lead to really devastating health outcomes from not having any caregivers at all. The same is true for the cognitive development when there's not access to language.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's it. It has to, so 0 to 3, to answer your question, 0 to 3 is really that critical period of when the brain is the most plastic, the most able to learn and change. Those first 3 years, huge.
Hmm.
But of course, it continues up to like the next milestone, sort of 7. That's like the first 7 years. A lot of early childhood development happening in that. And then the next is like puberty. And that is in terms of, let's say, learning a first language, a second language. If people are bilingual
Hmm.
and exposed to their bilingualism before puberty, then it's much more likely to be a native language, rather than if you learn it after puberty, then it is sort of like an L2. The way it's organized in your brain, it's not like natural and native as it would be before. But good news is our brains remain plastic for our entire lives, and we have that neuroplasticity to learn and grow and change even after that for our whole
Is
lives.
that why I remember you saying earlier that you have bilingual children. Is that why you had your children bilingual?
Well, we live in Israel now. My
Hmm.
husband and I are American, so we speak English at home, and they get Hebrew from the school and the environment. I think there's so many myths, unfortunately, around bilingualism. Oh, if you focus on one language, they'll lose the other, or you don't want to confuse them. All of those things are not quite true. And the more language, the better, is one of those expressions. It builds on each other. Um, Children who are bilingual also have this skill about meta language, like thinking about the fact that this same item, this cup of water, has the same, like it, we're calling it a cup of water, but in another language they'll call it something else.
Hmm.
And so they have an awareness that language is arbitrary and different, who to talk to, and who, you know, it's really cool. So it's sort
Yeah.
of like we're doing it because of our situation, but I recommend that and encourage that for anyone if
Yeah.
that's your situation.
So when did you guys move to Israel?
Just 4 years ago. The
Oh,
kids were
wow.
quite young. The little
Yeah.
one was 7 months, so she really, you would think would have the best Hebrew, but really, then Corona came and we were super isolated for a while there.
Yeah.
And so she's a native English speaker. The Hebrew is sort of catching up.
Yeah. Oh man, what was that experience like?
Probably similar to a lot of people. A lot of good, a lot of bad, sort
Yeah.
of mixed bag.
Yeah, to move to
Very,
a whole
very.
nother country in the middle of all that.
No, so we were actually here
Right.
for about a year before,
Yeah.
but yeah.
That is
It
crazy.
was challenging, but we also really focus and I tried to focus on the fact that the pause was forced in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
um my working situation changed, and I spent a lot more time with the kids than I had previously, which came with its challenges and
Hmm.
also a lot more opportunities for connection.
Yeah, that's yeah, good and the bad, right?
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Well, what brought you to actually travel all the way over there from the US?
um our families came from here.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like we're playing ping pong generationally. But it's good. It's good. My husband is a doctor, a family physician, and he really wanted to be working here. So that all worked out. And it's really interesting too to change language for your career midway, or
Oh, wow.
at the sort of towards the start of the career. And he also said, the learning curve as an adult is very challenging, even though his Hebrew is fluent. It's professionally writing reports and the names of all the medications and all those things. But quickly, from action, you get through it.
Oh, wow. Well, is there anything else that you would like to share?
I would like to encourage anyone who's listening to try and, take a list on your phone or on a piece of paper and make a list of 3, 5, however many you'd like, just like things that you love about your kid, things that you're enjoying with them, and to focus on the strengths and the good things because you come into the doctor and they say, "What's wrong?" And you
Mm,
go to the teacher, the preschool, whatever, and they want to tell you the problems. And you're thinking about potty training and why isn't it fast enough? Like we're so focused on the things that are not happening yet or not happening fast enough. And so I encourage you to take that pause and say, "What's going great? What's really awesome about my kid? What's making me light up about them?" And do that on purpose every so often.
oh,
Also by yourself while you're at it.
that's such a good reminder. And where can we find you?
I'm the host of the All About Audiology podcast. So anyone who has any interest in hearing loss, cognition, advocacy, language development, that's that. We're nearing 100 episodes, so there's a lot there.
Congrats.
And Instagram, Facebook, and as well. So now I have this new thing that's also open to anyone, not related necessarily to audiology, which is the mindfulness weekly audios. So you can come find me there too.
Yeah, I'll link all that
Check
in
it
the
out.
show notes too.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us. I loved having you and talking all things audio and connection.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yes. And thank you, everyone, for listening. I will see you next week on the Early Motherhood Guide podcast.